guys, what's up? Killjoy Jake here, and instead of having friends, I have horror movies. 2 days ago it was my birthday, so I've decided to talk about my top 10 favorite horror films. Obviously my list is going to differ from yours, so leave your top 10 list down in the comments below. Considering the variety of this genre, there's no way I could pick just one film to be my favorite horror film. Heck, it's hard to narrow it down to just 10 films. So to reiterate, none of these are in order, these are just my 10 favorite horror films. Alright, now let's get into it.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Well, sometimes dead is better.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast!
There are other entities who are malevolent and have a more insidious agenda.
So let's talk about some honorable mentions before I get into the actual list. I really enjoy watching the Conjuring films. They just didn't quite make it to my top 10. My 3 favorite Conjuring films are The Conjuring 2, and Annabelle Creation. I think easily those are the very best. The rest of them are just kinda okay in my opinion. I really love The Descent. That's a great horror film. That just barely didn't make it to my top 10 just because I feel like there's a couple more things that I like more than that, but that's a great film. Highly recommend it. I love the Scream franchise. All 4 of those movies I grew up on. Those are all fantastic. And it scared the heck out of baby Jake. Alright, now let's move into the actual list. Kicking off this list is an extremely big horror classic that you might have heard of called The Exorcist. Formerly the scariest film of all time. I don't think it's really the scariest film anymore. I mean, back in the 70s, sure, but now there's so many things that have topped it. I love this film so much though still. It has a great story, great characters, and everyone knows about the visuals from this movie, that's for sure. Reagan throwing up pea soup on people, that's freaking great. Who doesn't want to watch that? Next up is Friday the 13th Part 2, or really any of these sequels. I watch the first one every now and then, but like 2, 4, 7, and maybe like Jason Takes Manhattan, and you know what, Jason X too. Jason X slowly grew on me a little bit. I didn't like it when I first saw it, but like I've seen it like 2 or 3 more times now. There's something about that movie, like it's wildly different than the rest of them. Obviously, it's in space and like there's a robot girl and all this. There's a lot of weird chemistry between the characters. For some reason, the more you watch it, the more it works. At least for me. It's cheesy as all hell, but that's why you watch it. Friday the 13th Part 2 is probably the only one that actually really scares me though. That, I don't know, something about Baghead Jason is really horrifying to me. And like the visual of his mom's head just like sitting on the shrine to Pamela Voorhees that he has in his like creepy backwoods house. I love it. It's so cool to me. It's such a cool image and it's disturbing as all hell. In my opinion, has the strongest characters and plotline of all of them. Would love to see the return of Baghead Jason as well. I mean, we kind of got him in the remake, but not really. Next up is the Paranormal Activity movies. Judge me, I don't care. I love these movies. People rag on these films all the time for being, they're not really scary, they're just reliant on jump scares. They're so much fun to watch though. You get interesting to watch characters, and you also get like really good jump scares, which I'm a fan of. There's nothing more fun for me than sitting around with my buddies who haven't seen most of these films and showing them that, and knowing where the jump scares come, and then seeing them, you know, jump out of their skin basically when it happens. That's super enjoyable to me. I mean, I guess maybe if you're watching this film like alone, like by yourself, maybe you kind of get bored of it, I guess. Watching the Paranormal Activity movies in a group setting is just, it's so fun. It's just a good time overall. And I can't wait for that 7th film, which I'll have to do a video about soon, because there's been some news about it. Also, my favorite from the series is probably the 2nd film. A lot of people crap on that all the time. Christopher Landon did a fantastic job with the sequels. I would not love this series nearly as much if Christopher Landon was not a part of it. And why, you might ask? Like, what did he do? Well, instead of just making a sequel with like a different group of people getting attacked by some random unseen ghost, he incorporated the first movie right in the middle of the 2nd film, which is pretty brilliant. The only thing I didn't like is the fact that he named his ghost Toby, the least intimidating name that I can think of. Number 7 is It Follows, which is an unbelievable horror masterpiece that never gets talked about. Between the crazy sex monster and the incredible score, the horrifying images, I could go on all day about this movie. To me, this is the perfect blend of a horror film. You got your jump scares, you got your creepy imagery, you got your slow burn horror in there as well, and my favorite thing that is how every horror movie should end, an ambiguous ending. It might lead you to believe one thing in that ending shot, but it could go either way. It's ambiguous. It's so smart to end a horror movie like that, because truly the scariest thing to an audience member is the unknown. I don't know, I could talk about this movie forever. The score, too, is one of my favorite horror movie soundtracks ever. I'll have to do a top 10 list of that sometime, too. Next up is Jaws, because of course this has to be on the list. Out of all the movies in this list, I've probably seen Jaws the most. When I was a kid, I was shown this movie at the very young, ripe ripe age of 8 years old. Let me tell you that if you're someone who goes to the beach a lot, don't show this to your kids. I remember the first time we went to Florida, like as a family vacation, I was horrified. I was like, nope, not even going close to there. I'm just gonna hang out on the beach like, 10 feet away from the water. I don't even want it touching my toes. You ever see that meme of like irrational childhood fears of the shark swimming at the bottom of the ocean? I had that fear all throughout my life. I remember I'd be swimming and I'd be like looking back and forth like this, like trying to see if there was like a great white coming to get me. That would horrify me. Swim team was a nightmare to me. But if you want to hear me talk more about Jaws, I have this little video up here where it's my review of the whole film, plus one of its sequels, Jaws 3D. You can only imagine who wins that battle. Next up is Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator. Easily one of the best cult classic horror films ever made. This film is bloody, disgusting fun, has one of my favorite horror villains, I guess, horror anti-heroes maybe, I don't know what you would call Herbert West, but Herbert West is the character I'm talking about. Christopher Lloyd and Jeffrey Combs are really the only two people that can play like this mad scientist character. It's so like kind of cheesy but also believable. Like I believe Herbert West, like I believe that he's like this determined guy, he's gonna perfect this serum to bring people back from the dead, and usually in a horror film there's some kind of explanation like, oh maybe his wife died or something and he's like, okay, I'm gonna try and bring her back. There's none of that. There's the simplicity of this guy is determined to do his science experiments, and he's gonna take whatever risk he has to get there. Besides that very interesting character study, this movie's just so much fun. It's so quick too. Like it is so fast. This movie feels like it starts and it's over. That opening scene is just like, it's so fast. It sets up so much in like this very small 2-minute little scene. I'm always saying that if your movie feels slow, you're not doing enough. And Re-Animator is a perfect example of everything you can be doing in your movie to set up more things. Because if you think about it, Re-Animator's a slow burn. But the reason it doesn't feel like a slow burn is because of all the crazy interesting character stuff and the wild plot points it has along the way. Some slow burners are just trying to set up the big explosion at the end, and that's it. That's all they do. But you can do more with your movie, believe it or not. Re-Animator is such a fun film based off of a H.P. Lovecraft story of the same name, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It is a must-see for horror fans. Next up is Hellraiser 2, Hellbound. I was gonna put the first Hellraiser on here, but I'm so much more drawn to Hellbound rather than the first film. I don't know if it's that ending that takes place in the labyrinth, or if it's the crazy imagery in this whole film, or just the fact that I think the plot's just slightly better in the second one than the first one, but there's something about this movie I love so much. It's a lot more like trippy too than the first movie. Like don't get me wrong, that first movie's got some trippy scenes going on in it, but you really only get to go into like a hallway of the labyrinth. You get to see like the whole freaking dimension in this movie, which kind of contradicts my statement from earlier that, the unknown is scarier, but at the same time though, this is kind of more of like an artsy slasher film. You also get more Pinhead in this movie too, which is, what everybody wants. And to be honest with you, like 1, 2, and 3 of the Hellraiser movies, some of the very best in horror in my opinion. And then they really ruined their name with the rest of those sequels. Wow, dang, those sequels after that are pretty bad. Next up is Halloween. I really love the whole Halloween franchise. Even like 4, 5, and 6, which are just like unbelievably weird and take the series in a direction that I never thought that series would go. I just love how like crazy this franchise is and how important this franchise is to the horror genre. If you think about it, the first Halloween is kind of what popularized slashers. It's a misconception that the first Halloween is the first slasher movie. I would say that there are more before it, technically, that had that same kind of formula of a dude killing a bunch of like babysitters or girls, camp counselors, whatever. But the first one popularized slashers. The 2018 film kind of is bringing this like new thing on, like, and this hasn't really happened yet, but the 2018 film is bringing this like new wave of horror where we're doing like, instead of remakes, we're doing sequels to original classics. Now, as I talked about in my Texas Chainsaw video, Texas Chainsaw 3D was technically the first movie to do that, but Halloween 2018 is what really popularized the idea. This franchise is just so revolutionary to the horror genre and has made like 2 really big changes to it, and one we're still waiting to see, but I'm predicting that we get a whole bunch of these like continuations to originals, because if you think about it, it's gonna get praised more than just a straight up remake. And that's why Halloween 2018 got so popular. Halloween 1, 2, 2018, and maybe H2O, like I love those movies. Next up is Insidious. That's a real surprise. I love all 4 of the Insidious films. They're so great. They're so enjoyable to watch. They have great plots, great characters, great monsters. I'm gonna be talking a lot about Insidious tomorrow, so like I'm just gonna kind of save that rant for tomorrow, but like basics about this series is I love the fact that it's basically a monster series, but also paranormal at the same time. And that's super cool because like all all 4 of the monsters are pretty freaking scary, man. On top of that, you have some of the scariest jump scares I've ever seen on film before. And trust me, I've seen the first Insidious like 100 times. That film still scares the hell out of me every time I watch it. And lastly, but not leastly, Ari Aster's masterpiece, Hereditary. I wanted to say that this was my favorite horror film of all time, but it's not. It's really not. When I saw it, it blew me away. It's the film that got me into horror films, so it would be kind of a sin to not put it on this list. Back in 2018, Jake was just some rando on YouTube who was making some wild skits, and then I saw this film and it changed my whole world. I didn't think a film could scare me as much as Hereditary did. I was so horrified by this film, I saw it like 3 days in a row, and I was so terrified of Toni Collette being in one of the corners of my room that I really didn't sleep those nights. A year later, I created this channel because I had to talk about this incredible genre. At first, I was gonna make just a straight up movie channel, but then I realized horror is so diverse. There's so much with horror. There's films like this that'll make you laugh and scare you at the same time. There are films like Hereditary that will scare the living piss out of you. And then there are films that will really make you think. Out of every film genre, horror is the most diverse and will make you feel in so many different ways that I had to base a whole channel around it. But with that being said, I highly recommend you check out Hereditary. You've probably seen it if you've been alive for the past 2 years, because it's arguably the scariest film ever made. I'm saying it right here, right now, easily the scariest film ever made. Midsommar's also pretty dope too. So what does your top 10 list look like? Leave it down below for me to check out. Thank you guys so much for watching my top 10 horror films ever. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more horror content. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at KilljoyJake1 and on Instagram at Killjoy_Jake. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.